Hello, I'm Sensei Alex Kakuyo, and the title of this talk is Escaping Toxic Relationships. But before we get into that, I'll remind you to subscribe and hit the notification bell. That way you'll be notified when I post talks in the future. If you could hit the like button, that'd be great too. And if you want to do a deep dive into Buddhist training, check out my book, Perfectly Ordinary Buddhist Teachings for Everyday Life. It's available on Amazon, and there's a link to a sample chapter of the book in the description for this talk. So in order to understand what's going to be said, first we need to have a clear definition of what is a toxic relationship, and then we can better understand how to escape them. And to get this definition, I'll be quoting a Times article that gets the definition directly from the founder of the word. The paragraph states, Dr. Lillian Glass, a California-based communication and psychology expert who says she coined the term in her 1995 book, Toxic People, defines a toxic relationship as any relationship between people who don't support each other, where there's conflict and one seeks to undermine the other, where there's competition, where there's disrespect, and a lack of cohesiveness. And I think that's a very good, well-rounded definition. And before I go further into the talk, I want to make it clear that the first thing we need to do when dealing with toxic relationships and learning how to escape them is ensuring we don't fall into the trap of victim blaming. That is to say, if someone is locked in a toxic relationship, if we are involved in a toxic relationship, it's very easy to wag our fingers and say, well, they should just know better, or why don't they just leave? And while we're going to talk about ways to do that, it's important to understand that leaving a toxic relationship is not easy. We are human beings. We are subject to karma, and there are lots of causes and conditions that may cause us to get involved with toxic people. Maybe we had toxic family members or loved ones in our past, and we think these types of relationships are normal. Maybe we've suffered so much hardship in our lives that we're just desperate for any type of human connection, even if it is toxic. And so when I'm giving this talk today, it's important to understand I'm not wagging my finger. I've been involved in toxic relationships myself, and Buddhist training was instrumental in helping me escape those. And the Buddha himself also had many toxic relationships that he had to work through. He had family members that tried to kill him. He had monastics who tried to steal the Buddhist order away from him, others who misrepresented his teachings in order to undermine him. So dealing with toxic relationships isn't something that we alone have to deal with. It's part of the human experience. And like all suffering in life, it's something that we just have to work through and work through skillfully in order to make life better both for ourselves and all sentient beings. So how do we do that? Well, first, we need to understand, why do we get engaged in toxic relationships? And like I alluded to earlier, it's because we have toxic patterns within ourselves. One can think of it as living in an apartment building. If you and someone else have a similar schedule, you wake up at the same time, you come home from work at the same time, it's likely you'll run into that person in the lobby, in the hallway, in the gym. Not because you necessarily want to do so, but just because, again, your patterns and their patterns align. So if we're involved in toxic relationships, oftentimes it's because we have patterns, karmic patterns, that are causing us to move in those directions and run into those people. Now, there's a somewhat trite and cliched saying that applies to this, and the saying says, we can't love others until we love ourselves. Again, it's a bit trite, but it's true. Another way to think of it is, we can't have healthy relationships with others until we have a healthy relationship with ourselves. And the reason for this is that human beings don't like to be told that we're wrong. And we've all experienced this, where maybe we wrote something wrong on the chalkboard in school when we were answering a math problem, or we made a statement about history which was proven to be incorrect, and there was some embarrassment there. There was some pushback on our part. We don't like to be wrong. So if we have a negative view of ourselves, for whatever reason, if we think we're stupid, if we think we're ugly, if we think we're unworthy because of things that have happened in our past, then we naturally get attracted to people that reiterate that thinking. So if we think we're stupid, for example, and someone else says, "You're stupid," we subconsciously say, "You're right." And we again get attracted to them, not because we like being called stupid. That's a violation of right speech, which is the third tenet of the Noble Eightfold Path, but simply because they're agreeing with our assessment of ourselves. Vice versa, if we have a negative view of ourselves, again, if we think I'm stupid and someone says you're smart, even though that's a very nice, very comforting thing to be said, we withdraw from it because it doesn't fit with our own view of ourselves. This is a karmic pattern that needs to be broken, because what's happening is subconsciously we're running away from people who are kind to us. We're running towards people who are harmful to us. And thus the cycle of toxic relationships continue. The Buddha, in order to break the toxic relationships in his own life, had to realize enlightenment and see his own Buddha nature. Because when he realized that he was a Buddha, that he had inherent value, that he was worthy of love and compassion and care, he very naturally started to demand that of the people around him. That's why when he went out into Deer Park and people asked, "Are you a man? Are you a god?" he said, "No, I'm awake." He was awake to his true nature, and thus he was able to escape toxic relationships and respond skillfully, moving away from people that harmed him and moving towards people that loved him, because he understood he had value. And because he understood he had value, he only wanted to deal with people who respected that value. And when he dealt with someone who was not respectful of that value, he was able to have a conversation, but he was also able and willing to cut off the conversations at times, generally by simply responding with silence once the conversation had taken a left turn. And the same is true of us. We, as Buddhists, have to understand that we are Buddhas, that we are enlightened beings, that we are worthy of love and care and attention. And once we realize our own enlightened nature, again, we move away from people who treat us badly and we move towards people who treat us well. To think of this another way, imagine your own altar at home. If it's mine, like mine, maybe there's a Butsudan on it, a statue of the Buddha, some candles for your light offerings, some incense for your incense offerings. And you clean and respect your altar because you understand the value of it. You honor and respect the external Buddha. More than that, if someone were to come along and disrespect your altar in some way, maybe they, knocked over a statue of the Buddha, at the very least, you'd pick up the statue and put it back. Maybe you'd politely ask them not to do that again, because you understand the value of the external Buddha. Well, an important part of our practice is to understand and respect the value of our internal Buddha. To value and protect our internal temple, this physical body, this internal Buddha, in the same way that we honor and respect the external temple and the external Buddha. Once we do this, once we understand the value we have, then again, escaping toxic relationships becomes easier. So how do we do this? Well, bowing, chanting, meditating, these are all practices that are designed to point us inwards to see that Buddha for ourselves. That's why I, as a Buddhist minister, am constantly saying, "You're Buddha, you're Buddha, you're Buddha," because I'm reminding you of your value. And the rituals we take part in as Buddhists also remind us of our value. When we pay homage to the Buddha outside ourselves, we very naturally pay homage to the Buddha within ourselves. And as we honor and respect both, we demand that other people do the same. So that's the talk for today. I hope it was helpful. If you'd like to read articles I've written on Buddhist practice, you can do that at my blog, The Same Old Zen. If you'd like to continue the discussion, talking about situations you've had escaping toxic relationships, or simply ask additional questions about Buddhism in general, please leave a comment in the comment section below. I promise I'll respond, and I love to hear from you guys. So, until next time, Amitabha.